Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 325 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to finish up with the tungsten setup and then start talking about uranium. Enjoy. And as far as the other things we need to deal with, we're going to make the fluorite ore, but that is just an acid item, and luckily we're in pretty close proximity to where it's made, right here. So we would just send a belt down here and it would go along its way all the way down here to the fluorite warehouse. Since it also requires the fluoride gas, that it's probably either a perfect loop or close to it. But we can figure that out because we need the hydrogen fluoride gas. So let's pop out here and make that setup. And it looks like it comes from a couple places. We can make it with puffers if we really wanted to. But I guess that depends on how limited we are on it. And it doesn't seem like we really are. We tend to always have it. So normally, the hydrofluoric acid is made by mixing the fluorite with sulfuric acid. If we take that and add an extra step to it, we can turn it into hydrogen fluoride gas, and that will give us some fluoric wastewater, which can be processed back down. So let's make sure this is linking properly. So that's in there. It requires the hydrofluoric acid, and just out of curiosity, let's put it in here using the method that we're making it with, which is from the sulfuric acid. Just to see, and you can see right there that the input is 13.64 of the fluorite. So we are getting some of it back, but it is certainly going to consume some. So that's good to know. But our setup, I believe, can actually put out 60 fluoride a second. So that's not really going to be an issue. Okay, the other thing we need is hydrogen chloride gas. We need 150 of it. I imagine our existing setup is plenty good for that. It's at 60K. It's something that's pretty easy to make. And I'm sure this setup will easily be able to make it, and they're not even modern machines. But yeah, they put out 675. So I'm thinking 150 is a non-issue. What about the 136 for the acid? Because this is only being made by one machine, but it has been upgraded recently. So it's actually fine as well. Then we have outputs. We have the fluoric wastewater, which we probably should handle locally, because we don't really pipe wastewater anywhere. We generally just clean it at the location that it's at, because it's just easier that way. Well, one byproduct it makes is the calcium chloride. So we're going to have to do something, and, well, that's worrisome. Empty. There's nothing to do with it. Darn, doesn't look like it. That this is actually a byproduct that we're just stuck with for now. That it has two outputs. One is in the tier 3 of titanium pellets, and the other, I imagine that's going to be tier 3 of cobalt, because that's going into cobalt oxide. So that's actually kind of tricky in the sense to where the only way to get rid of this stuff is making these two resources. We'll just have to store it in a warehouse. Okay, well, out of all of this, the last thing we need to handle is the purified water. So we'll zap it away, and we'll do it the easy way without using the electrodes, just so it's simple. And that does require a couple of machines, but modules kind of help. Still requires two. Well, let's start with this line of machines. And I did put that here. I wonder if it should stay there, if we should squish it, because then we would have more room for the uranium. But then again, this is being used for glass and can be placed anywhere, so we should probably just pick that up to make space for uranium. Okay, well, we're going to have two belts going out. So we'll just pick them up on the side then and just leave a space in the middle, I suppose. It's not something we had in our inventory, so robots won't help us. And I'm guessing we're going to need 3 stack inserters for that, because it's going to be a whole belt. And it stops there. Because then we need these, and we can just space them. I wonder if we should make a little bit more space, just so we can easily walk between all of this in case we need to. Because it's not really direct inserted, it's just pipes in this case. And then it creates the output of water, which we will need to handle. Just put that there to show that we need it. then it does need to be direct inserted into this machine, which also needs its input. Let's space it out by 2, and also check these. Yeah, I think they're good. Would be nice to get rid of the flashing, though. Man, I'm so amazed by the wire reach there. It's always quite impressive. Alright, these guys are going to have an input. And we also need to shoot the resources across, but we can just use long-handed inserters and they should be able to reach that gap just fine. So you have the output there, and I need to remember to check for the other resources because these are going to have the output of the calcium chlorides. So since it's not actually going anywhere, how about we put 2 big old warehouses in here. One right there and one right there because it has nowhere to go currently. And we'll figure it out later when we have that research done. It's going to put out 5 per second, which sounds almost like a yellow inserter, but not quite. It's going to have to be a purple. I don't think we need filters because it's just that one output. So that one's good, that one's good, and that one just creates our gas, which goes into the final step here, which is going to require a fuel. So let's give it the 3 spaces again. And in fact, these pipes don't even really need to connect. Do we move these to make the pipes go straight through, even though the machines wouldn't be perfectly aligned? I'm thinking we do. There we go. So that goes through. These need their fuel, which could be anything. I think our fuel blocks were like way out here. They've been going pretty much the wrong direction because we've always had them available from this bus down here. I've been complaining about it with these other ones, but how about we just go straight under? Because we actually don't need this space in the middle for anything. So it can go straight through. And it's but one belt. So just the splitter will be fine. And it looks like some of our fuel blocks have made it in here. They will mix in whenever the wood blocks are unavailable. Machines don't care, they'll just pick up what they can. Okay, and then this is going to have its output of the fluorite, which is going to have a fairly long belt here. It looks like we combined these two into the one belt because we just felt we didn't need it. I bet this whole thing does put out 60. Well, it puts out 30. It's less than I thought, but since this is where it's mixing, and it's reasonably close, let's just slide it in here. And it only needs to be a yellow belt, but we probably do want to use our purple just so we can jump the gap. Let's see. Well, we could just put it straight up through the middle here, because the fuel belt only needs to go to there, but let's do the inserters here. Kind of like everything else. It'll need 3 inserters, but 3 is going to be kind of weird. So let's do 4, with some of them being nearsighted, and they mix together there to be good. And I guess we'll just kind of mix it in right there. Although it doesn't even really need to be that color. Although it might help for throughput, but I think the reds will be fine. Because I think all the other machines are red, so I kind of want them to be consistent. We need our warehouse. We haven't piped this in to the bus yet, but that's fine. We just haven't gotten to that point yet. Put that like over there. Does it mess anything up? I don't think so. So we'll line that up. That looks like it's good. We do need to put the logic in there, so we'll have to wait for this stuff to get placed. And then the amount of fluorite is pretty low, but it might just barely be out of the reach of a yellow. So we'll do the purples. And then that needs to swing down here. But we do have some chemicals we need to handle. We need to make the hydrogen fluoride gas, and that doesn't seem like something we need to put on the bus. We'll just use the acid itself. It goes in right here, so it makes sense to put it there. And in fact, since it's also 2 machines, that these can actually be placed right next to each other, and at least with this side the pipes line up. But that's not how it works over here. So that's a little sad. And then we need to get that acid in here. It doesn't seem like an acid that would actually be up here. Unfortunately. I think we're going to have to make a very long pipe. Because it's right here. And actually, well, it's going. But it stops right here because we were making the hexafluorosilicic acid just right here because it was convenient to do so. But unfortunately, we took up that same slot on the pipe. So we're going to have to move the pipes around a little bit. But it's actually not as far away as I was thinking it would be. So in fact, we could get that space back by moving that over. So this can stay in a straight line, at least up until there. And then we need to figure out which one of these to use. There's a lot going on here. Good thing we have the room for all of this. I think it'll be this one right here because this belt can just go wherever it needs to. So I think it would be right underneath nitrogen. No, and it just barely, well, it just barely fits into here, but then it doesn't right there. But I think we're just going to do some pipeception. Just go straight underneath. Because that's what's easy. So there we go. Well, before we start hooking too much up, we probably want to at least get this belt going. Because it might take a few moments. So this would go down, but there's some stuff in the way. Guess we'll just pick it up and move it. So it would come down here. And jump over all of that to get in there. I do think the belts are a little weird though, because we're pulling the chrome from over here. So tungsten would actually look a little cleaner. Whoops. There you go. If we use those two belts there, and then chrome actually went above, so that way the belts wouldn't have to jump over each other. So this one is chrome. It will keep going. But the tungsten goes up right there. Bots will place that eventually, and then the process of getting the resources out of the repository will continue. I imagine it will basically be empty by the time we've got this set up. Which is nice, because then the only thing left is oil residuals. Once we've gotten rid of that, we can get rid of the repository. Which is something I've been looking forward to, because it's basically the sign of the closed loop, that once you get rid of that, it means every resource has somewhere to go and somewhere to get used. Okay, we'll close that off there. But we needed to get the acid in, and we could probably just go, wow, it jumps over that whole building. I'm always amazed by these late game pipe distances. They just seem so crazy. Okay. Piped in. Also piped in. Machines are going. Making the acid. And unfortunately, both of these setups create the purified water. So we can't put the water plant's output back into the system because they both have the same output. So it's just going to have to stay like this. But we can do that. We have the purified water, which we can swing around here. And it is kind of crowding here, but I imagine this stuff will just be picked up with the next tier of tungsten. But I don't know when we're actually going to get around to that, because it's been a lot of ore handling rather recently. So I don't know how much more of that I really want to do compared to, I don't know, launching rockets. So I'm doing all of this just to maximize the factory's productivity to a point. But at the same time, I kind of want to see it all in action, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. So we've got our mineralized water output as well, which can just come down here and jump that again. But to keep the pipes lined up, I'd rather do this. And then that barely fits. Hook that up. Give everything some lights. Now that I'm thinking about it, because I usually forget. Okay, that's in there. We've got our wastewater now. We'll hook it up. The purified water is being made. Mineralized water is leaving. We do have our output belt. which let's put here. It's very little, so we don't really care about it. We just put it there. There's the fluorite. Still using the lowly yellow belts, even at this point in the factory, because they're still good, so why not? Now we just need to get the fluorite. It's interesting that both of these setups produce some amount of fluorite, but either way, it's not going to be enough. But we can kind of snake the belt in here just to make it go away. And then the last step here is we need to electrolyze the water. Or I suppose I should say we don't need to electrolyze the water, but I want to because it's closed loop. So it doesn't really matter where these go. I don't know. Might look better if it's facing up like this, because then this pipe can just go straight up. Then we have those two outputs, but which one should we use? This is the pipe bus for the factory, which is the correct one. What is this pipe going towards? Ah, it's going to make the silicon. So that makes sense. So we can actually use that pipe. And since those pipes are here and they're kind of cleaner than over there, we might as well use them. Oh, hey, the electrolyzing is going. So if we put that in, we're making use of it now. And then how about we just use this other slot for the hydrogen? And it kind of snakes in. Right there if we use the longer pipe. Okay. So I think we're pretty good here. The modules still need to get there, but they will. Oh, but we have one more thing here. We've got to get the hydrogen chloride in, but luckily it is just right down here. So it's quite easy to get this last bit in. Excellent. Okay. Fingers crossed it works. Because we have been waiting for this tungsten for some time. Uh-oh. Well, we need to have filter inserters there. Where this is the powder, then we can do this, except make them not the powder. And, oh no. Well, luckily, it doesn't look like it was too bad, but I kind of want to just block this off here and just kind of let that clear out. In fact, we can do something kind of temporary, but it'll handle it for us. Or we'll just put a loader in here, let it clear out naturally. And for this one, we'll just grab everything. We do need a buffer chest. And oh yeah, I guess we don't make those, so it wasn't delivered. Where we want all the powder to get in there. We did need to set the logic here. Same as everything else, 1000. And the filter for the powder as well. And let's create a logistics trash request to get rid of the powder. And now they should bring it there. Yep. Okay, we got to clear all this out here. Get it through the system. Okay. Meanwhile, all of this is cleared out now. I don't know if fluoride actually has somewhere to go. I guess we can find out. Well, it does. It's at 0, so I guess it's been taken. Okay, let's try again. I mean, yeah, we're getting our 2 belts worth. It seems quite smooth. And the repository is going down. But oh yes, this actually needs to be a regular warehouse again, if we're going to use buffer chests like that. And no, it put it in the trash. Boom. Okay. Looking good. The next step of tungsten is going to have to wait for the next step of ingots and everything else with the better coil handling. So this basically concludes all of the ore processing steps that we have access to. Now the only things that are left are just the tier 3s of these last few things we've been working on. Titanium, cobalt, gold, chrome, and of course the tungsten. But there is one more resource that we really have never handled, and that is uranium. And we're at 147,000 oil residuals, so this is probably as good a time as any to start processing it. We don't necessarily need to use it yet, but We probably should get the nuclear reactors set up, just so it's not a race against time when we run out. Because I don't know how quick the factory is just going to stop working when suddenly we're not able to make these fuel blocks anymore. It'll probably happen pretty quick. Well, we're not going to need any of these ore processors or anything anymore. So I'll just remove the logistics request, since we might want those machines in the future. I don't necessarily want them to be at 0. So now we can chuck all those into the system, and we're good there. So one thing we're going to need to do when we do our better coils is we need to have 2 more resources that we're only treating as byproducts actually turned into coils. One of them is zinc, which we can see here, and is one of the things that we upgraded, because we need zinc plates in order to make the final tier of batteries, the silver zinc battery. So we do need zinc in plate form, and we also need nickel in plate form in order to make our final tier 3 of robot parts, which we haven't been able to make yet, but that's related to all of this right here. For now though, so why is it still running? Seems like it should be full by now. Oh, it's at 13K, so something's not right. So it usually fills up pretty quick. Ah, because it's set to chrome. There we go. Well, now we have 13K of tungsten. Don't worry, it'll disappear. Well, let's review uranium here, and we're going to have some more researches to do. So the first step in processing is to take the uranium ore and filter it down in a centrifuge into uranium-235, 238, and 234. And you can see that the percentages here are all very low. Now, uranium-234 is not 0, it's just extremely low. But also, 238, we have basically a 100% chance of getting one, but it's only 1. So 10 ore are going to come out, and we're basically going to get like 1 in return. So what it means is that we might want to process it here, but we don't necessarily need to take it any further than that, because once it's been reduced from a 10-to-1 ratio, then it'll be much easier to transport on like drones or robots or something like that. But nonetheless, that's the step there. And then as far as making the power, you put uranium-235 with 238 to make a 235 cell that has 2 gigajoules, and one 234 and a whole bunch of 238 to make a whole bunch of 234 cells. And the 234 cells are worse. They're at 1.5 gigajoules instead of 2, but note that the 235 recipe gives you 15 cells, while the 234 recipe gives you 100 cells. So 234 is a fantastic fuel. And one interesting thing is that 234 is used for nothing but fuel cells. So if we search 234, the only thing it goes into is a uranium fuel cell. So if you get it, you basically just want to burn it, because that's the only thing you have to use it on. But if you get 235, it actually goes into other things. Like it goes into potentially making plutonium, making atomic bombs, making nuclear fuel. So when you're thinking of something to burn, you want to burn the 234s before the 235s. But even then, both of these are basically fuel, because the plutonium nucleosynthesis is not very good, and I'll kind of get into that in a bit, but it's kind of a junk thing. So really the only things you'd be saving it for is fuel and bombs, but actually nuclear fuel isn't the worst thing in the world to use it on. So just keep that in mind, that the 235 is technically a little better than the 234 as far as using it on other things. So if we get 234, we'll want to burn that first. So let's say we burn those. What happens then? We get a used uranium fuel cell, and this is the first step, which is kind of the bad one, where you can grind them up into slag into 238, but you don't really get any of the valuable results of uranium fuel. So this is just here to keep you from being overloaded on fuel cells if you went with this early. We did not, so we're going to be able to skip it and go straight into plutonium-based power systems. And what's funny is we're probably not going to be using it on making plutonium for fuel. Not in the traditional way of Factorio. the advanced uranium fuel reprocessing, we'll take those fuel cells and we add hydrofluoric acid, and we'll get still mostly 238 out of it, but we will get a little bit of neptunium. You send that through a centrifuge, and then we will get plutonium. And then what do we do with the plutonium? Well, one thing you can do is to make a mixed oxide fuel cell, which is a similar recipe to uranium, except you have to put lead plates in now, and it has 8 gigajoules in it, so it's a substantially better fuel in that sense. So when we're done burning the fuel, we can reprocess it to get more advanced materials. We will get a little bit of americium, which we can use for other processes, a tiny bit of curium, and a little bit of uranium. And if we go back to plutonium recovery, we can use that americium with some plutonium and turn it essentially into plutonium, where 60 uranium go in and we get 15 out, but we've converted the americium into plutonium, which we can then put into more fuel cells and burn it, or use it for other things, and some lead oxide. So with this process, the only thing that you're left over with, besides all of the uranium-238, is a little bit of curium, which you can't really use for anything. So we hit that, and we have more research that we can't quite do yet, because we don't have one of its prerequisites. And it's kind of odd, because I'm not terribly sure which one it is, considering we have this. That is very odd. I wonder if it's some hidden requirement, because we really should be able to research it. I don't see it. It's just has the one requirement, so why isn't it letting us research it? I don't know. It seems to be straight up missing from the list. Well, that's going to cause problems, because we need this to beat the game. Huh. Well, I guess I am going to have to do some diagnosis, and then I will be back later. Alright, I'm back. It's good news and bad news. Bad news is I couldn't figure out what was causing this, because it very much seems like this should be the only prerequisite, but it won't let me research it. And I looked at the mod configuration files, and I'm certainly not a modder. I don't understand much of it, and as far as I can tell, I didn't find anything wrong, but my guess is it's some kind of conflict between Angels, Bob's, and then one of the other mods. And I tried uninstalling some of the worst offenders, like Artisanal Reskins and the Offshore Pumps mod, and neither of those were causing the problem. So I don't know. But the good news is there is a way to cheat our way around this problem. If we open up the editor and come in here, it will let us research anything we want to, even if we don't have the prerequisites for it yet. So just left click to research and shift left click to instant research with all prerequisites. And I tried that, and it didn't give us anything new. It just gave us this research. So it's not like there's something hidden. Well, that's not working. I was thinking maybe it's because we're researching something else. So, well, I didn't actually test that to see. So that's kind of frustrating. Then I guess we'll be forced to force research it so we can continue. I was hoping to just talk about stuff, but it's kind of hard when there's an issue like this. But we can at least check on the science setup and make sure that it's working okay, because some of the things were changed. When you're actually sitting here waiting on research, it takes a long time when you're just staring at it, unfortunately. But so far it's handling itself okay. So fuel oil is low, but that's because we were making naphtha using a method that doesn't create any fuel oil at all. So once this level goes down, we'll start seeing how it works. But I guess we can just let the research go and maybe just use the recipe book here to talk about things. So, like I wanted to say, the next step here is the plutonium synthesis, which gives us 2 new recipes, the good one and the bad one. The good one is where you take uranium-238 and then plutonium, and it takes a lot of plutonium to get started, but then when you're done, you essentially converted 3 uranium-238s into a plutonium-239. And this is the same as the Kavorex process in vanilla. The idea is the same there. This is space magic. And the other thing you can do, seems less space magic-y, but it's also probably space magic, is you take your uranium-235 and 238, and you will get a little bit less of those back, but you will get a plutonium. So the advantage of this is it will create plutonium essentially from nothing, that it requires no plutonium to get started. So you can use this, as inefficient as it is, if you really need to create a lot of plutonium to get this process started. But this one is better because essentially you're just turning 3 uranium into 1 plutonium, where here you're turning 2 235, so a pretty valuable uranium type, and then 5 of the 238s into 1 plutonium. So this method is a lot worse. And kind of like I mentioned, this is a fairly closed loop cycle. The only thing is the curium, which we will be left over with. And we get that as a result of processing the mixed oxide fuel cells. So, if we never use the plutonium fuel cells for power, we'll never have to deal with the curium. And of course, there are higher level researches that we can do eventually to handle that, so we will be able to handle everything. But you might be asking yourself, wait, why wouldn't we want to use the plutonium? Isn't it really good? And yes, it is really good. But if we come back here to this thing we can't research, plutonium synthesis, and take it to the next step, it's the radiothermoelectric generator, the RTG. And this thing is quite important. The RTG itself requires a 239 plutonium, and some of these other things that we'll be able to make, but the main idea here is the plutonium. And what does the RTG go into? Besides some very high-level things like the fusion power robots that don't need to be charged and the Spidertrons, it goes into the satellite, which we need to make science. And not only does it go into the satellite, 10 of them go into the satellite to make 1. And since launching 1 satellite will give you 1,000 space science, it means that in order to get 100 space science packs, we need 1 plutonium. So that's the rate of conversion there. And this is probably going to be one of the most limiting factors of how many rockets we can launch. At least based on what I've seen on the factory. I could be wrong about that. Oh, made a glass request. And it looks like this isn't filling up, but I kind of want that to. I'm testing this to see if this is oil residual positive or negative, because I'm thinking whether it's positive or negative depends on how we handle the fuel oil. So if we're not pumping the fuel oil out, I'm not sure what's going to happen to it. I think it's going to make it negative, which isn't the worst thing because we are trying to get rid of the oil residuals and we're kind of switching away from them anyway. So it's not that big a deal. But I guess I have to come in here and stop research a second. Because our ultimate goal, which isn't that far down the list here, because we've researched so much stuff now, is the faster-than-light propulsion systems, which, based on my current settings, will require 20 million science. And luckily none of these earlier tiers require it. And that requires 1 science pack, which means we need 20 million space science packs. And since it's a 1 to 100 ratio of plutonium into our science pack, that means we are going to need 200,000 plutoniums. So several warehouses full. And when you look at the recipes and how slowly they actually create our plutonium, 60 seconds for this one, that it's probably going to be the main limiting factor of rocket launches, unless we, of course, create more fuel. But you can kind of see how I really don't want to be burning the plutonium because we actually need it for our rockets. So I'm thinking we're only going to really be burning uranium just to create plutonium, because you'll see once we go into hell mod that Learning plutonium is especially efficient for power, well, especially massive for the amount of power that it can make. So we kind of need this to finish here. So I've finished getting through what I wanted to, and it's not done yet. Hurry up. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we're going to use Hellmod and plan our uranium and plutonium producing setups. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.